Davies and Timothée Chalamet. So I remember when I first saw the film, directly afterwards I had a lot of feelings and I wanted to talk them all out. I suspect maybe you guys are going through the same thing out there. Is there a part of the movie that is very, very dear to your heart? Even just a moment or an experience that you had making it maybe, and can you tell us why?
I think Lisa Gay Hamilton's monologue, and I hope I'm getting the name correctly, but she gives the speech in the Al-Anon meeting at the end of the movie. And that's kind of just a devastating scene to watch.
I like the Al-Anon speech about mourning the living. And of course I like the diner scene. But I really love Steve on the edge of the cliff talking to Amy Ryan on the phone too.
Mm-hmm. For me, I always love when Timmy stands at Steve's desk in the empty office, and he's alone, and he's sort of standing for the first time in the place of where his dad sits, and he realizes he hasn't really earned that place.
Yeah, and him standing at the desk is also, to me, it really reminded me that this movie comes from two books, two different perspectives of the exact same thing, and it's just that kind of that meeting of the worlds. So as far as production design goes, as far as the house is concerned, can you talk about that as a location? Because there was a lot that went into it, and it really results in it feeling like kind of the beating heart of the center of this movie outside of the characters themselves.
So this was a really interesting process because, when you're making a movie about people who are still alive and who are both observers for a living, you want to get it right.
Yeah.
So we immediately knew, Felix and I, the director, immediately knew we wanted to visit the chef home. It was like day 2 on pre-production when we flew up there and spent 3 days with them. And we were like respectful, but also kind of acting like detectives. And
you were digging through stuff?
Digging. And because people are always, in my line of work, they're always so ready to tell you some things and not even aware of the things that they're omitting. So one of the things we learned there is, and this really became a theme for me in designing this film, was this is the last place on earth where you'd expect somebody to engage in self-destructive, shameful behavior. This was a very open, progressive, intelligent, highly creative environment to raise children in, very accepting, very kind of hippie, off the grid, progressive ideals. And yet it fostered this addiction, because addiction happens anywhere and everywhere. Sure. So the house had to feel open and free and really in touch with nature, just like their home was, because later, as we evolve into the rehab clinics and we evolve into despair, drug addicts naturally covet places without sunlight, covet places without having to socialize, basements, underneath stairs, subways, tunnels. It just naturally is part of the addiction and the shame of it that you hide your actions. And so the home really needed a contrast with that. So we actually built the entire second floor. It's all on a stage. And the elements that are on location are the kitchen and right outside the kitchen. And that house is in Calabasas and was inspired by the chef home.
Timothy, did you feel a difference at all when you were on location versus when you were on that set? Because it's so consistent, to the audience's eye.
Absolutely, and that's why it's awesome to get to do a Q&A with Ethan, and because we were talking often on set, and it can be very odd to act on a stage. Like, doors aren't weighted properly, so you'll like open a door and it'll never come back. and so, but then I love that scene between David and Nick in the beginning. He was talking about surfing, and Steve shot, there's a Nirvana poster, and there's a couple of other really signifying elements that were so specific. So it was awesome to be in Ethan's world, but like generally it's maybe easier if it's a natural setting.
I read that you got really specific acting notes at times. And is that the case? And do you happen to remember maybe a moment that you were playing differently that you kind of went back after speaking with Felix?
I know, that's, if people in here have seen Broken Circle Breakdown, that's Felix's other film, like, its superpowers, like human intimacy or human emotions, and also because it's based on a book. Without like a specific example, I know there were things where, as an actor, if the like inspirations to kind of find your truth or find like whatever reactive elements make it interesting, there were things in the book that were so specific it would, as Ethan alluded to earlier, be kind of like dishonorable or something not to get those right. So there were things in the diner scene. There was like very specificity about that phone call at the end, looking out on the bridge, because that's in Tweak and in Beautiful Boy. But it was really like trying to honor the family, their lives where the specificity was seen.
Did you just carry Tweak with you, like in your back pocket during the process, or was there a time when you just kind of left it behind?
No, I think in the pre-production process, I think it's true for a lot of actors. Like, you dive into it as much as possible, almost to give yourself license as a way, and not to feel like you earned it. Or in hanging out with Nick before the movie, I really got a sense like, I don't have to. The cliche here would be to play a drug addict, like play a human who's addicted to drugs, and that's more the truth of it. So in the pre-production, there's a lot of like I think the process of taking yourself out of it, and then once you start shooting, not trying to be entertaining and not in a facetious way, but it's also a movie. Like, you don't want to insult an audience's whatever capacity for indulging you.
Right. Luke, you had an unusual challenge in not just adapting one book. This is, the merging of two, and you worked with Felix on that. Can you describe the process? Because I did so much reading on the movie after seeing it, because I was hungry for more information, and the way that I saw you phrased it was a beautiful, chaotic wrestling match. I was like, Jesus, even that's beautiful.
I don't remember saying that, but I believe I did. It was, first of all, Felix is a wonderful guy. It's a shame he couldn't be here tonight. He's a new dad. He had to skip back to Belgium. And it was a matter of, the challenge. One book is challenging enough. A book is 20 hours long and a film is 2 hours long. 2 books is like 40 hours, so there are very logistical questions of what is essential and what can be sacrificed. And the chaotic wrestle or the boiling down was this continual process of getting it down to the central story. The good thing is that the 2 books are in no way like Rashomon, where you're getting conflicting viewpoints of the same thing. The 2 books really back each other up, so that the same things are happening from the 2 perspectives, but there's no dispute about subjectivity and point of view. In the end, the mission statement was just that this is about the love that exists in this family through very fractured and traumatic circumstances, specifically in their father-son relationship, and more broadly in the family, and that the love would be the glue that held the narrative together, and that therefore we didn't have to go off into the trenches with Nick's using too much. It was the home base place was the stuff going on between father and son and the stuff going on in the family.
This movie is one of those films that makes me feel smarter when I watch it, because I didn't feel like it spoon-fed me a lot of answers or a lot of lessons. It was, I pulled a lot from it on my own. But did that give you any kind of anxiety at all? And do you feel the same way about it?
Yeah, I like that you say that, but I also feel anxiety that there are people sitting here right now who are like, no, they didn't succeed at putting the 2 things together, But that's what we tried to do. I kind of loved the challenge. Ultimately, it's Felix's baby. There were a lot of changes that happened in the edit as well. But it was exhilarating trying to find a way of showing the relationship between Nick and his dad, and to make it feel like one coherent cinematic story, not 2.
Ethan, I started looking up your credits and was like, oh my God, he works with the greatest musicians, and now I understand why everything looks so great. So can you talk about the difference in the process? Because these are really different projects for really different mediums, and yet, the look is always like,
The difference between music videos or tours and movies?
Absolutely. Like the process of creation. The biggest possible
On music
question I could
videos.
ask.
On music videos and tours, you have 20 minutes to design something that will be around forever, and an unlimited supply of money if you're working with, some of the people that I'm fortunate enough to work with. On movies, you have an enormous amount of time and no money at all. That pretty much sums it up.
Yep, there you go. There you go.
Well, and yet I read that also part of the location work was like really interesting stuff. Like you guys created miniatures. Is that true?
We're talking about on
For the movie?
Beautiful Boy.
Yeah. And like
miniatures.
modeling?
We did I know what that you're referring to. Okay, so Felix and Ruben come from Belgium, where they don't really have production designers. They were very open about this with me when they first met with me and said, we have prop masters and set dressers, but we sort of like use whatever's there and make it work. And we're curious about building sets, and we're terrified. They were really, really not sure how to negotiate that new tool. And as referencing what Timmy said earlier, it can be challenging and it can require you to kind of use muscles that you don't necessarily have developed or that you don't even want to. So schedule on this required us to build that house. Scheduling required us to build the New York hotel room, all the bathrooms. Scheduling required us to build a donut shop with 24 hours notice. Yeah. That's actually a great story.
What?
We lost our donut shop location.
I didn't know that.
You don't know this
We
story?
were like deep in Los Angeles, and it was like a New York donut shop. And but you did a great job though. 'Cause
Dude, the story there is we lost the rehab clinic 3 days before shooting,
Oh yeah.
where the last scene takes place.
Yes, I
And
do remember this.
we'd focused we'd anchored that day around that rehab clinic. It's the last scene in the movie. By the way, it's now the poster of the film. And so we were like, and we found this other rehab clinic literally by driving around. And the reason we chose it was because it had the dead vines on the wall. And that was sort of this thing that we kept playing with, is the idea of like nature, we're moving further and further away from nature, everything's dying. And now we have this final shot where they're surrounded finally by nature again, but it's dead. Will it grow back or not? So we now needed to find a donut shop near there. So I'm like the tech scout is going on. You guys who work in film know that's not when you're looking for locations. That's when you're like figuring out all the details. And I'm running around to Thai restaurants thinking, can I make one of these work? And I walked into this Thai restaurant 3 blocks away, and she didn't speak a word of English. And I was like, this would make an amazing donut shop. And yeah, 48 hours later we were shooting, and she was like, what did I agree with?
But the dance worked. That worked.
But to tie it back, because why not? That's kind of way music videos work.
There you go.
So you were like, next time, give me something difficult.
It's okay.
So since this movie premiered the premiere was Toronto, right? Okay. So it's been a little while. Timothy, I was wondering if kind of in this journey in the last couple of months, if you've really had meaningful interactions with the people that have seen the film, because it's impossible not to respond to it.
Absolutely. And I'm like trying to negotiate in my head, there have been some really incredible moments, and that feels like not the right word or something, because this isn't it is incredible, but not in a necessarily uplifting way. So there's been, I feel like I've learned a lot about the makeup of like this country in a way, or what a lot of people are going through, at least a lot of young people are going through. So yeah, it's been since the beginning working on it, and like you said, in the last couple of months now, we went on a regional tour with Nick Chef, who I think we went to Missouri, we went to Texas, we went to Minnesota, and it's everywhere, and still not totally okay to address or awkward or something. And then on the other side of it, kind of glorified too sometimes. So I don't know, it's good to be able to sit in a room with everyone and be able to talk about it here.
Is there a lesson or something that you learned from playing the character that you carry with you? And and again, it's sort of weird just saying the character, because Nick is a real person that's with us. So is there something that you've taken from playing the role?
I hope it's not crass, but maybe from like an acting sense, like even the way Tweak is written, for those that have read it here as well, it's very like moment to moment. There isn't really a past or future tense to it. It's just like Nick is writing in a way where it's just like, I needed this thing, then I needed this thing, then I realized I needed this thing, so I went to get this thing. And as an actor, that's often what you're taught in drama schools, or you're taught to think moment to moment, or this idea that as an audience member, to see like honest emotion on screen or somebody actually going through something is more powerful than whatever, somebody in a control room or something. So I feel like I will walk away with that and through the lens of Nick.
Luke, I was wondering, when you guys were working on writing this, if there was any kind of music that accompanied you, if that's the way that you work. There's kind of a soundtrack to this before there's an actual soundtrack to the film.
No, it's not the way that I work. Extremely interesting piece of film trivia, sidebar, is that Candy, the film that I wrote, that was like the third last film that Heath Ledger made, came out 10 or 11 years ago, has Goretzky's Third Symphony and the Tim Buckley version of Song to the Siren in it. And Felix had one seen Candy, presumably, but like total coincidence, those two pieces of music are in this film as well. That will be on a film trivia website. But no, the books are absolutely saturated with music and musical references. Each of the chapter headings in Beautiful Boy is a quote from a song. David was primarily a music journalist. David did the last ever interview with John Lennon before he died. I think it was the Playboy interview, and he did a lot of stuff for Rolling Stone as well. And so I'm not really the person to ask that question, so I won't take up space. It's the influence of music from the books is very much in the film, and they weren't so much Felix choices as channeling stuff that was already in the book.
Do you feel that there's a commonality in your work recently? Because you brought up Candy, but these are very different films. But do you feel that there's any kind of theme that you're specifically attracted to?
Oh, I would like to.
Luke wrote Lion, which is like an amazing movie.
Thank you. I would like to have a reputation or a future that involves being recognized for writing films that have emotional, good, strong emotional journeys and characters and so on. I resisted this because of that thing of like, wait a minute, I did Candy 10 years ago. I was broke. I read the books. I recognized their authenticity, and I said to my agent, I'm not going to take this job, or I'm not going to go for this job because of that. I don't want to be pigeonholed as like he writes drug films kind of guy. And she said, okay, well, I support that, but you should still take the meeting with Plan B because they're like one of the best companies in town and you should meet these people. So I was going into that meeting knowing that that's what I was doing. It was a good idea to meet Jeremy Kleiner, my agents told me. And what happened was, the week of that meeting, Philip Seymour Hoffman died. And 10 years earlier, Candy had premiered at the Berlin Film Festival. And it was my first ever experience of red carpet and this and that. A little tiny Australian indie drug film was there, and it was like, oh my God. One night, the Capote people and the Candy people all went to dinner together in an Italian restaurant in Berlin. Heath Ledger was there, Philip Seymour Hoffman was there. Jump forward 10 years, he dies, and the night before my meeting with Jeremy Kleiner, I get an email from my dad, random, which says, I suppose you heard Philip Seymour Hoffman died. That's kind of sad. I remember you telling me the stories about dinner in Berlin. Luke, sometimes I feel this family is so blessed. And it was my father's way of saying, I'm completely aware that it's a fluke that you're alive. I'm completely aware of how fragile it all is, that some people die and some people don't. But it was like this moment of, like, I just thought, okay, so the universe is telling you maybe to go down this path. Because when I wrote the novel Candy and the screenplay Candy, there's no father figure in Candy because my past was so close to me that I couldn't deal with it emotionally, I couldn't process it. So I just took the father out of the entire narrative, and then suddenly 10 years later it's like, okay, here's a chance to investigate that relationship.
I also read that there was an extra special production assistant on this film, and I wondered if you could talk about Jasper, chef.
Jasper is Nick's little brother. He's the little boy you see in the movie, and Jasper is really he's really mischievous and really creative, and
He's a grown adult. He's a grown.
That's an important detail. Yes. He's about 22 now. But he was in the office working as a production assistant, and he was doodling. And we had this really important prop, Nick's journal, which you know now from seeing the film plays a role. It's it's really the only time we get to see inside Nick's head, unabated, looking through that journal. So it's if you're constructing clues to a mystery, that's where the breadcrumbs lead, is to that journal. So we wanted that to be really, really right. And Jasper was doodling a lot in the office, and I was became very friendly with him, and his drawing kind of looked a little bit like Keith Haring, a little distorted, and always black and white, and kind of harsh. A little bit of Art Crumb to it too, a little sexualized and sort of drug infused a little bit, and we just said, look, here's a journal. Go home for the weekend, play with it. Let's see what you come up with. Maybe we'll use some of the images for the journal. And he came back Monday with the journal. He just filled it, and it was so authentic and so right. And of course, he's genetically more similar to Nick than anyone else on the planet. It didn't make sense not to harvest that. So we got really lucky with that. And I think, when you're making a movie, you're always looking for ways to capture or recreate reality, and you've got to be open to whatever clues or serendipity you're offered, and this was a pretty big one.
I think that's a great note to end on. What do you
Yes.
think? Everybody, please give them a hand.